Total surrender, giving it all to Him. I've seen some pretty amazing things in my life of people who've done that much like this gentleman, didn't always live a very good life, didn't have the greatest witness at all in their early time, but boy, they came to be amazing, amazing people. So, breaking chains, Mark chapter 5. We're going to look at this message today from this story that we're familiar with, one that we've heard, the demon-possessed man and all the things like that. But we're going to look something different. I want us to take a little bit different spin with this, because when we think about, we hear demon-possessed and legion and the pigs and all the different stuff. That's the parts we're most familiar with, right? But I want us to look a little deeper today. I want us to look at the encounter with Jesus, because there's something so powerful in this that is life-altering. And I really believe this. I don't just say that to be sensationalistic or anything, but there is something here that is so powerful. All right, so we begin and we find this story. It's a pretty terrible description, right? We have one here who lives in a graveyard. All right, that's where he lives. All right, he is unable to be dealt with. Everybody's scared of him. He's a wild man. He's scary. He's uncontrollable. He screams. He cuts himself. I mean, he sounds like somebody you'd want to stay away from, right? That wouldn't be the kind of people you'd want to be hanging out with, right? And so we see this, and it's like, well, how could we possibly turn that into something that is life-changing? How could we possibly turn that into something that has a beautiful story? Well, think about this. It said that they attempted to shackle him. They attempted to chain him down, and all of those things were pointless because he just broke them. He was so strong, nobody could do anything with him, but at that time, they didn't consider that he had a legion of demons inside of him. They had no idea what he was battling. They had no idea what he was wrestling and fighting in his life. And clearly, what we see is the physical chains could not hold him, but the spiritual chains controlled every breath. And many people are fighting that today. Okay, and so this is very, very real and very, very up to times right now. So last week we talked about the lady who was disabled by a spirit, but here today we see one who is absolutely possessed by a spirit. All right, so we immediately see, and this get ready to hold on. Get ready to hold on, because there's something great right here. Jesus exited the boat. All right. It says here in this very second verse, it said, as soon as he got out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came out of the tombs and met him. We're told here this one that had the unclean spirit, this one that was uncontrollable, this one that was deeply, deeply held in spiritual bondage. Think about this, friends. As soon as that's Jesus, got out of the boat, the man with the unclean spirit came out of the tombs. Where's that? It's the graveyard, right? That represents death and everything of that. It says he came out of that and met him. Why is that important? Death came to meet life. Think about that for a minute. Death was stepping out. This man was dying. And he wanted to meet life. He came out. This was his one chance. This was the one moment that the demon wasn't holding him back, right? This was he broke free for just a second. He wanted to see what life was. Death came out to meet life. And so we read that the chains couldn't hold him, right? We read that he was not able to be held down by the shackles and the chains, but we see that he is still clearly in bondage because he's in torment. He was surrounded by death. He lived in the tombs. He lived in the graveyards. He was surrounded by this. He was surrounded by chaos in his inner being. It said he screamed and he cried and he harmed himself. He was never at peace. He was never seen favorably by others. They feared him. But the real person, the one that was there, that soul that God wanted to save, the one that was there, the one outside of the demonic possession, he wanted what we all want. He wanted to be loved. He wanted to feel joy. He wanted to know what life really is. All the things that we want. Where did his life go wrong? We're not told. Where did his story take a wrong turn? We're not told. We don't know what created this place of bondage. This place that was so strong that shackles and chains couldn't hold him there. Stockades and prison cells couldn't hold him. And ultimately what this creates is a place of hopelessness. Well, I can't make it. I may as well give up. I can't make it. I may as well quit. A lot of people get into that place, right? Hopelessness, again, when we don't have anything that we can have a confident expectation in, that this is ever going to make my life better. This is why the understanding of the person of Christ is so important. Again, we go back to death coming to meet life. I don't want to stay here. I don't want to be in this place. How can I get to where you are? How do I find this beautiful place? This is what we need to understand. This place of hopelessness, this is exactly what the enemy wants more than anything else. This is the place that he wants more than anything else. He wants us to quit. Is that an easy place to get to? Yeah, because things are hard sometimes. You know, again, we struggle with that. The reality of life is difficult. You know, some of the powerful videos that have come out over this last week of the resilience of the people in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. They're saying, whether somebody comes and helps us or not, we're going to be okay. You know, they're standing strong because they're helping each other. Many of them are praying for each other, and a lot of us obviously are praying for them. We see that resilient spirit that I'm not going to give up. But that's where the enemy wants us. He wants us to get over in the corner and crawl up and just quit, because then we're not a threat. Then we have nothing. As long as he's got this, demon-possessed man hid off on an island, back in the tombs, everybody's scared of him. He don't affect anybody, right? He don't make any changes, and there's one more soul off the playing field. He wants us to live as this person, as if we were dead. He wants us to harm ourselves physically and emotionally. He wants that, because then we become of no service. But Jesus came to give life, and it more abundantly. That is the gift from God. When we begin to understand this and we say, just like that gentleman in that video, I want some of that. I want that. That's what, because that's the gift that's being offered. That should be what it is that we desire. And so what we find here is bondage is real. It's very, very real. It's not a Hollywood script thing. It's not a horror novel or what. No, it's very real. The demonic forces around us are very, very real. Evil is very real. Just talking about it is very uncomfortable, to be honest with you, because it sounds goofy. It just does, because we've been convinced that that's what it is. We've been convinced that that's just Hollywood and that's just, a TV show. No. That's what he wants you to believe. He wants you to laugh at the guy dressed up like the devil on Saturday Night Live. That's what he wants you to do that. He wants you to think the closest you can get to the devil is the deviled ham can. He don't want you to take it serious at all, And so what we find is that when he gets us off the playing field, we're no longer a threat. But what we find in Jesus is there is nothing he cannot set us free from. How many of us believe that today? There's nothing he can't set us free from. Even this person in the darkest side of depression and oppression and every other kind of thing, we find here there's nothing Jesus can't do. And so the story continues. Jesus, we find, has authority over all things. Jesus has authority over all things. We look in verse 6. And it says, when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and knelt before him. Okay, so we find something here. He, that's the man, saw Jesus from a distance, and he ran and knelt before him. Now, this is a time where both the man and the demon recognized who they were dealing with. This is a beautiful moment right here, because now this is where it's starting to get real. We're starting to see lines crossed and boundaries get all kind of muddied, and there's some weird stuff going on here, because this is that inner war. This is that fighting. I need to get better. I don't want you to. And it's that battle. Don't we do that inside here sometimes? You know where you need to be. Yeah, I know, but it's too much. It's too hard. It's too much everything. No, and we fight ourselves. I've fought me more than I have ever anybody else. Paul talks about that we don't war against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities. Well, what do we think is causing this yin and yang back and forth? That's what it is. And so we find here this one, he ran and knelt down before Jesus. The demon, it tells us, cried out with a loud voice. This is what's important as they knelt down before Jesus. And I say they because there's a lot going on here, right? The man wanted freedom. But the demon wanted mercy. Isn't that unreal? The demon recognized the power of God. The demon knew, ain't there no power against God, didn't have any strength against God. Please don't do anything to me. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? This is such an incredible moment. So it says he cried out with a loud voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus?" He calls him by name. So the demon knew. He knew who he was dealing with, right? He says, "The Son of the Most High God." So what we find there is total recognition. Not just a, well, I remember that was the guy from town. No, he knew who he was dealing with. If the demons know, we should know. We should know the power of God. We should know the mighty presence of God. And so the demon said, "I beg you." Think about that. I beg. This is a sincere plea from one recognizing that another has the power and the authority to carry out their mission. So he knew, because Jesus said, "You come out," he didn't have a choice. He had to go. Do we need to understand today, friends, God still has that power. He's still given us that authority to call them out right now. You know, we have the ability to say, "You got to go. You can't stay here. You have no authority in my life." You know, we need to understand that today, and I'll touch on this in a minute. Evil and the enemy himself has no power we don't give him, because all that was removed at the cross. It was all done. It is finished. Not as, well, we got a little bit done, we got some more to do. No, it was taken care of. But we don't always do that. We don't exercise the authority God has given us, and that's what we see in this story. The demon says, "Don't torment me." Why was the demon in panic? Why was he in fear of Jesus being there? He knew the power Jesus had. He knew the power that he carried and the authority over all things. And it tells us in verse 8, he says, "For he had told him, 'Come out of the man, you unclean spirit.'" He didn't want to do that. He was comfortable. He liked what he was doing, right? He was enjoying aggravating this poor guy, right? He had all this great stuff going on. But Jesus told him to come out, and the demon knew he had to obey. He had to. So what do we take from this? Evil is wicked. Evil is disruptive. Evil is overwhelming, but evil is not all powerful. It's not. Evil is weak. See, evil blows a lot of steam and hot air and puffs up. You know, if you look in the animal kingdom, some of the smaller animals, they kind of blow themselves up to look scary because they don't want anybody to bother them. But they don't really have any kind of strength or authority to carry out that look, right? And so we see that here happening. It can be all kinds of different things. Evil is not all powerful. It can stay somewhere, but it is not allowed to stay there unless we let it. It has no strength that it is not given. As I said, Jesus has the authority to give, to bring freedom and restoration to everyone who asks, regardless of what the bondage is. So we see one here that seemingly would be in a hopeless situation. Here's a person possessed by a multitude of demons. You know, we've just known people who act like they had one because they were meaner than a two-headed snake. But here, this poor guy has got a whole bunch of them. A whole army has moved in there. A legion, it says, could be up to 12,000. That's a lot. We don't know what the number is. We're not told, but that's what the demon said their name was. So that's a whole bunch, right? So we don't know all the circumstance, but we know Jesus can set us free. Which takes us back to verse 2. Death comes to meet life. And if you don't take anything else away from this message, I want you to remember that part, because that is so important. Because as the Scripture says, you know, that we walk in that until we come to know Christ. And that old is set off. You know, that old becomes new. It says the old passes away. Right? That's death. It's got to go, right? This is such a powerful thing that we see. So with this personal encounter with Jesus, it brings change. It brings change. In other words, deliverance equals change. Because when I've been carried out, I've been brought out of this old bad place into a new one, I don't act like I did when I was there, right? Or I shouldn't. It should be a whole new place. And that's why we see this miraculous, beautiful story beginning to unfold here before our very eyes, because this is like unbelievable. And so we see Jesus personally deals with the demon. He says, what is your name? In verse 9, what is your name? He asked him. My name is Legion. And he asked him, because we are many. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. And so we see in that section there about sending them into the pigs and all that stuff. I'm not going to really get into that, because that was Jesus dealing with the situation, right? So he handled the demonic side of it. What I want us to deal with specifically today in the last bit of our time together is the personal encounter with the man. How was his life affected? Okay, see, Jesus dealt with evil. What does that tell us? He can deal with yours. If you got a devil aggravating you, tell him. You got to go. You don't have any authority in my life. You know, and Jesus backs that up. And he says here clearly what happened on that bar. So we move and we find out the issue, and then we find the results. We move over to verse 15. And it says, they came to Jesus. That's the ones who were familiar with everything that had happened. They had seen, it tells us what had happened. The men who tended them ran off. They ran into town and told everybody. So verse 15 says, they came to Jesus, and they saw the man who had been demon-possessed. Now think about this for a minute. When they left, they didn't know what was going on. They just seen all this wild activity happening, right? And all of a sudden they seen the pigs running off the cliff, and they didn't know what had happened. They come back, and the very man that they left was not the same person that they left. Isn't that awesome? That should be us. We shouldn't be the same. We shouldn't be the same after that encounter with Jesus. So we read here, they came to Jesus. Now, obviously, initially as they come back, they're pretty hot. They're pretty upset because their income was gone now. I mean, all the hogs had run off the cliff, and so they were that was their part of it. That's how they sold, and they bought and traded and sold and whatever. And so, but what does it tell us that they saw? Okay, obviously the pigs are gone and they're upset about this, but they saw the man who had been. That's former, past tense, demon-possessed. He's sitting there. Now, mind you now, before when they'd seen him, he's wild and he's walking around and screaming. He's got blood all over him and he's a mess. It tells us that he's sitting there. That means he's calmed down. Things are in a better place. It tells us he was dressed. Now he's covered. He's not in the state that he was. And it tells us he was in his right mind. Now he's found life, peace, joy, truth. In other words, he's been set free. Man, what an incredible moment we find as we begin to look at this in a much deeper, in a much personal way. And it says, and they were afraid. Think about that. They saw something here that was mind-blowing, but it tells us they were afraid. This new life set before them now. This brand new life is sitting before them, and it struck fear. It struck fear. That seems a little odd, right? But what was going on here? They recognized the power of God. In other words, they realized, wait a minute, this is real. This is not some made-up thing. This is not just one of those myths and legends that have been being passed down. This is real. You know, Peter would later in his ministry would say, we don't give you fairy tales and myths, and we give you what we actually saw. And here, they're seeing this, and they're like, what do we do with this? I mean, this is way bigger than me. I don't get this. I don't understand. Just how great is his authority? I mean, we know how awful this guy was. He scared everybody to death. He was awful, and he lived over here. And now he's normal. He's been transformed. He's been made new. How is that possible? Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore, and in other words, as a result, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and see, that means visual, the new has come. See, they're able to see the new has come. This guy that was once the wild man of the graveyard is now sitting there and able to have an intelligible conversation. He's able to talk to them about what has happened in his life. The formerly possessed man was not just partially restored. No, he was completely made new. This moment, friends, it paints an incredible picture for us, a reflection, if you will, of what Jesus can offer to everybody that is bound by something. He can set us free. He can make our life completely new. He can change everything about us if we will let him. If we will, there's nothing that we can't bring to him that he can't break off. There's no yoke that's too heavy. There's no bond that he can't break. There's no chain that can't be broken. We see, in other words, and this is important, and I think this was absolutely ministered through song this morning. This is important. You don't have to stay there. This is what I want you to understand this morning. You don't have to stay there. You can be set free. And it doesn't matter what it is. And we're talking about an extreme case here of demonic possession. That's kind of scary. The whole idea about that's scary. But a lot of people are bound by all kinds of things today. Okay? And we can get way beyond addiction. Okay, a lot of people, yes, are bound by alcohol and drugs and all that kind of stuff. But there are so many people that are bound by hopelessness. There are so many people bound by pride. There are people bound by, it's an innumerable amount of things, okay? There's nothing that God can't set you free from. Nothing. And this is like an extreme case here. And when you read through it, it's like, wait a minute, there's something amazing here. This is an incredible story because the demons, as I said, they blow a lot of smoke and a lot of hot air, but they have no power. They have no power. We have nothing to be afraid of. Only what we let them do. Now, if you let them, you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, I promise you. That's why it's important to not play around with that stuff. You know, and again, I don't want to get on no soapbox about that, but we really have to be careful, friends, what we let in our homes and what we allow in our life. Because if you don't think for a second they won't come in, all you got to do is open the door. You know, you've heard me say it before. Never give the devil a ride because he'll always end up driving. Every single time, all you got to do is crack the door and he'll get in. You don't even have to stop. You can just do a rolling stop. I used to arrest people for that, but you can do that, you know, but it'll get you a ticket. But seriously, you can do that, and that's all he needs. He'll slip right in. Can you give me a ride to so-and-so? Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Oh, sure, buddy. And then before long, you're in the trunk with your mouth gagged, and he's driving, taking you somewhere you don't want to go. Now, that seems extreme. Oh, Pastor, that's scary. You don't want to play with that stuff. I used to have people come to me in a town we used to live in that had a known problem with demonic activity. There was a lot of stuff happening there. And people would come to me for counsel or talk, whatever, and they were talking about, well, we want to go on this or we want to go. I said, you better leave that stuff alone. You better leave that stuff alone because it is real, friends. And what we find in this story is whatever road this gentleman took, it took him to a bad, bad place. And it nearly destroyed his life. Nearly destroyed his life. But Jesus can set you free. There's nothing that he can't remove us from. We oftentimes speak about faith and fear. We've had many messages about that. We've had many, all kinds of statements about it. But here's the thing. These two things do not coexist. Okay, they are not on the same plane. They are two completely different things. They don't work together. We oftentimes in this life, we're faced with the opportunity to choose between two matters. We do. We get an opportunity to choose yes or no, whatever. We get all the different opportunities to choose in this life. We get the chance to do that. It says in verse 16, as we look further at the conversation being had, it says, those who had seen it described to them what happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs. And then they began to beg him to leave their region. Now think about this for a minute, okay? So they saw this amazing miracle, this unbelievable thing that happened. A life had been saved, a life restored. But they're asking Jesus to leave. We don't want you here. Think about that for a minute, okay? We find some selfish nature in that, obviously. But what is the overall problem there? Jesus was bad for business. You can't work. You can't, man, you're killing us, man. You've messed up all of our thing here. He was bad for business. Not just the loss of the pigs, but all the things that would come with it. The question and the chaos and how did it happen and how was this possible? But again, a life was healed. A life was healed, and there seemed to be no concern about that. There seemed to be no excitement. There should have been a celebration. I mean, it should have been, get out the party hats and the blowers and the bouncy house and the rock walls and everything that we had yesterday. I mean, they should have been having an incredible moment. This was like the worst part of our town, and now it's something to celebrate, right? But they didn't see it that way. The fear of the unknown. And then you attach material stuff to that. It blinds people to the things of God. It does. It blinds people to the things of God. For you see, there's this guy, I see him every now and then. He posts these videos, and he's just kind of the man on the street, and he's just walking down the street, just randomly talking to people. And he just asks them, he says, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he says, do you believe in Jesus? That's all he asks him. Do you believe in Jesus? And friends, let me tell you something. The answers he gets and the looks that he gets are heartbreaking. They are heartbreaking at the lost nature in the eyes of so many people. Is it that they truly don't know, or that they fear what they've heard? See, a lot of people don't want to be held accountable today. And this is not about judgment and damnation or stuff, but no is no in the eyes of God, right? And we have to deal with that. And that's accountability and understanding the beauty of that. Because sometimes that no is the best thing you've ever heard, because it changes your life to get you back where you need to be, you know? I mean, I'm sure we've all had opportunities like that. You didn't get this job that was your dream job. You thought you was going to get it, but it ended up actually being the best thing that ever happened to you, because you got to be where you were supposed to be, you know? Or your high school sweetheart. On occasion that works out, but sometimes it don't, right? And you look back later like, boy, I dodged a bullet on that. I mean, just kidding. But seriously, we see sometimes no is okay, because it gets us into a better place. And then sometimes it works out just fine, okay? But so that's not. But what we find here is faith, the acceptance of the things of God. When you do it and you trust that, and it's without fireworks, it's without picture books, but something in our spirit causes us to embrace the power of God. It causes us to creates a desire to know Him more. Sometimes it's not a bells and whistles thing. Sometimes it's not the stars falling and all that. Sometimes it's just like, I'm not who I used to be. Something happened, and I can't really explain it. I was watching the testimony. A singer, songwriter, actor, guy, he just passed away this past week, a guy named Chris Christopherson. Some of you probably have heard of him. He's been around for a long, long time, but a tremendous story. But I was listening to his testimony, and it was very interesting how he shared how he came to know the Lord. And he got invited to church by a friend. He said, I had no interest in that. I didn't have anything to do with it, but I just went so they'd leave me alone. He said, I was listening to what was being said. And as the message went on, it was interesting. He said, but I just didn't care nothing about that. And the pastor was talking about being lost and all this other stuff. He said, but I had no intention of participating, praying, raising my hand, not anything. He said, I was just there to satisfy a friend. But as the service went on, before it was all over with, he'd accepted Christ. He said, I found myself down at the altar saying stuff that I didn't even know what I was saying and agreeing to stuff. And he says, but something dramatically changed, and I saw things in a different way. And as a result, that he went home and penned the words to Why Me, Lord, which was a cool old song, if you've ever heard that old song. And I love the lyrics to that. It's a question, because he's asking, why me? He says, why me, Lord? What have I ever done to deserve even one of the pleasures I've known? Tell me, Lord, what did I ever do to deserve loving you, or the kindness you've shown? Lord, help me, Jesus, I've wasted it, so help me, Jesus. I know what I am, but now that I know that I've needed you, so help me, Jesus. My soul's in your hand. That's great words. And that's surrender. putting it in the hands of the Lord. See, friends, we can let fear keep us in bondage, or we can turn to the ones with the key and be set free. It's up to us. We get to make that choice. That's it. Do you want to stay where you are, or do you want to be set free? And he said, well, Pastor, that sounds so easy. It is. It's yes or no. You either want to stay where you are, or you want to be set free. And he's saying to you today, whether and hopefully, Lord, nobody in here has got a legion of demons, but if you do, God can set you free. But we see this today. We understand this. And so we see in verse 18, it says, and as he was getting into the boat, this is Jesus, of course, the man who had been demon-possessed begged him earnestly that he might remain with him. So I love this because, of course, that's Jesus, getting into the boat, it was time to go. As we learn with the ministry of Jesus, he did what needed to be done and he moved on to the next thing. Okay, he didn't let grass grow under his feet. Let me tell you, he had a time frame. He was working within that, and he knew what needed to be done, and he got it done, and he moved on. And then it says, the man who had been. Now, the reason that's important is because, again, this is the second mention of a past tense thing, had been, so he's still not. Once it's been fixed, it was fixed, right? That problem was taken care of. Had been demon-possessed, begged him, of course speaking to Jesus, earnestly, that's sincere from his heart, that he might remain with him. See, what had happened, friends, is he knew where this new life came from. There was not a question in his mind, and he didn't want it to end. He wanted it to continue. He wanted that moment. He wanted that feeling. He wanted this exuberance. He wanted all this renewal. He wanted it to never end. It's like the old chorus, I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. That's what he wanted. Man, that's where my heart is at. I'm not going anywhere, man. I'm in. Oftentimes, when something is new, something creates a great moment, we get lost in that place. We don't want it to end. We don't want it to end. Like those little kids climbing that rock wall yesterday. They didn't want it to get dark. They wanted to just keep climbing, right? They were having a ball. We get lost in those moments sometimes because we're having a good time. We don't want it to end. Man, I just wish this time could never end. I wish we could just go on and on and on like this. But it doesn't work that way. This is what we miss. And I realize this as I'm preparing these notes. We don't realize sometimes that often the lesson being taught in that moment is so we can go and teach. If the moment never ended, I would never go and be able to be of service. If what I'm learning in this wonderful time is only for me, I'm not a benefit to you. Is that true? That's how this works. See, every saved person, every delivered person is a teacher. Every single one. Now, they may not stand on a platform like this. They may not hold a microphone. They may not sing a song. But their story lets others know this is real. This can happen to you. This can change your life. The countless people, and I mean countless people that I have been blessed to know and to see over my last 23 years of ministry that have been made new in Christ, they are living testimonies. Whether they were addicts, whether they were criminals, whether they were broken homes, or whether they were just mean. And I've known all of them. People's lives that you would not believe, things that you wouldn't believe unless you'd seen it with your own eyes. Unbelievable stuff that I would just, as time goes by, we'll share some of those stories sometimes because they're life-altering. And when I see them now, and most of them are still alive, a few have gone on to be with the Lord, it's almost like this once possessed man that had been is now sitting there, and he's dressed and in his right mind. It's amazing. It's amazing, friends. And what we see is he wanted to follow Jesus. But what he didn't realize, he had an assignment. Jesus had an assignment for him. I want all of you to know Jesus has got an assignment for you. Now, somebody just got nervous. Oh, Lord, I got to go talk to somebody. Only talk when you have to use words. Let your life be your testimony. Let your life be your testimony, friends. See, this man who was wild and crazy. Not Steve Martin, but and some of you older ones will get that. But he was now sitting there in his right mind. And he's able to talk and he's able to communicate. He didn't have to say anything. Something happened to you. You're not the same. Something is different with you. And so we read through the last part of this, and it says, Jesus did not let him, but told him, go home to your own people and report to them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So he went out. He was obedient. He listened to the Lord. It says he went out and he began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and they were all amazed. See, Jesus needed him to stay right where he was at, because who could possibly better witness to those people than the guy that had him on the edge of their seat for a long time for all the wrong reasons? Okay? I mean, this is an amazing thing, because who would you listen to? This is like... That can't be that. That's the same guy. I need to hear what happened to you. I need you to explain to me what happened to you. And it tells us he needed others to see. Jesus needed others to see the gospel truth, that anyone can be set free. Because who would have believed that? Not just 6 months before. How about 6 hours before? Nobody would have believed that. It wasn't possible. It wasn't possible, but let me tell you, and it's a long, long story, so I don't have time to share it with you, but I'll just plant this little seed with you, and this is a true story. I know, or he's passed on to go with the Lord now, but did you talk about who God can set free? I know, and I know this story for a fact because I witnessed it with my own eyes, that former leader of the Klan became best friends with the black pastor that led him to the Lord, and he preached his funeral. That's how good God is. That's your testimony. That's your story. This is what, as this man is sitting there in his right mind and dressed and able to talk, everybody's like, whoa, what happened to you? You got to tell me, because I need to know. So Jesus said, I got an assignment for you. I need you to help others see that they can be set free. You see, friends, Jesus gives us our testimony. He gives us our testimony. What good is a story that is never told? What good is a story that is never told? We are called to go and tell. And we read here that he went out and he began to proclaim how much Jesus had done for him. And it says all were amazed. They were amazed. In other words, other lives were changed because he shared his. Other lives were changed because he shared his. This is still the formula. All these years later, this is still the formula. We can still see lives changed. We can still see people delivered from bondage. Why? Because Jesus still saves. Will you let somebody hear your story today? Oh, my story's not very exciting. You don't know that. You may have exactly what somebody needs to hear. Not all of us have traveled the world, you know. Not all of us have been body slammed and broke their back. You know, not all of us have done a lot of crazy things. That's not the point. The point is, were you obedient when Jesus called you? Were you obedient when you heard his voice? Did you let him change your life? That now you are a living testimony. This is a great, great story that when we see the personal encounter with Jesus part of it, death comes to meet life. We leave the old behind and embrace the new. Amen? Let's pray. Father.